Hello everybody, it's time again, back by popular demand. The Blue Jinjo did win. It's time for another
Mine of Ninjo!
That's never fun. That's actually quite a bit painful. Don't worry, the brain's staying in the head case for this one. So it's just going to be me talking to you. Like I said, the Blue Jinjo won by a very narrow margin over the red one. So that means that you guys want to hear more about Donkey Kong 64 Returns. Anticipating the Blue Jinjo winning, I've done a great deal of thinking about this potential idea, this game. And I thought this time we would talk about Funky and his utility in the game. Now, what Funky is actually as a character is confusing. I mean, obviously you've got his jam from Donkey Kong Country 1, which, by the way, I love. That might be my favorite song in the game. Hey, Future Ninja, put some of that in so I can dance to it. Okay, enough of that. But one of the things I want to stress is that I don't want Funky to be overpowered. In fact, it's going to be very hard to keep him from being overpowered, but I thought his role should be more utility and less actual gameplay. He wouldn't replace any of the Kongs. He wouldn't just be a Mewtwo-esque force to blaze the trails and make it easier for the other Kongs to get golden bananas, or actually golden cogs might be better for this particular game. You'll hear about that whenever we get to the plot, but I thought I would discuss Funky as a character first. His design is that he's funky. He's strange. He's the social abnormal. In the time whenever the original Donkey Kong was made, he was a pilot. Funky's Flights was where you found him. And his purpose was transportation. In the second game, in Donkey Kong Country 2, he was an air surfer. He was a surf bro. But he was a surf bro a little after the time of surfing being the popular thing. Funky's always a little bit behind the times. Then in Donkey Kong Country 3, he was a grease monkey. Again, a little bit behind the times. And in Donkey Kong 64, the game we're revisiting, he was a drill sergeant. But he wasn't a drill sergeant in the literal sense. He was just... I imagine Funky from Donkey Kong 64 as being that guy who's just like, explosions are radical, man. Which is fine in my book. But... so Funky's always a little bit behind the times. So for this game, I think Funky should be a hipster. I think they should give him a hipster hat, hipster clothes, and that should essentially be his role. I think that would be perfect. I mean, for his design, for his concept. But that only scratches the surface. Ninja, you keep saying Funky should be utility and that he shouldn't primarily be... he shouldn't be a primary character in terms of being like the other Kongs. What do you mean by that? I don't mean he shouldn't be playable in every level, because I do think he should be. But I think that Funky should serve sort of like a Mumbo-Jumbo and Banjo-Tooie role, where it'll be his job to open up the doors to other worlds. Maybe using his retro technology, because he's a hipster this time. Maybe he can, I don't know, find a circuit board somewhere and pick up an old Nintendo cartridge, maybe a Super Nintendo one, since that's where Donkey Kong Country started, and just to open up a new area in the level. which would mean finding Funky and enlisting him would be a challenge in and of itself, with the exception of the first level. For the first level, I think Funky should be the first character. Much in the way that in the cinematic, Mumbo ran out whenever Minjella and Blabelda went to free Gruntilda from her tomb in Banjo-Tooie. Except in this time you should control him. But I don't want to get into the plot just yet. I want to get into his other potential moves. How does Funky fight as a hipster? I think Funky should fight by donning on different lost-in-time personas. That there will be funky pads, there will be 1 or 2 funky pads in each level that will allow you to actually fight as Funky. Otherwise, he's pretty much defenseless. And the funky pads will be randomized. So you never know which one you're going to get. You could get a 1990s grunge Funky, a 1980s surf punk Funky, 1970s hippie Funky. Great big afro, goofy looking, kind of looks like Chunky in the DK rap at the very beginning. And each one would yield a different combat style. The 70s being the one that I've had the most fun with. Not because that's my favorite decade, because it's well before me, and I honestly think it was... Yeah, don't tread on anybody's shoes, Ninja. But that basically for the 70s Funky, you should get a tie-dye shirt, and his move should be peace and love, bro. So essentially, enemies run up to you hoping to deal damage, and unless they're mechanical, you can Funky will just go, whoa, and they'll back off and turn the other direction. This would make the Funky segments really challenging and give them a randomized factor, but it wouldn't make them broken. The Surf Punk Funky should be able to use the air surfboard that he's on in Donkey Kong Country 2 to essentially fly to the other end of the segment. Then, of course, the 90s would be the Funky from DK64. Basically, using all the different weapons that he provided in that game, all at once, to just blow right through the enemy forces. Now, these modes, for them to be have any kind of balance at all, need to either be extremely limited in terms of time, extremely limited in terms of range, much like Rambi or Ungard in DK64, or must be limited to specific areas of the level. In which case, the randomization factor would be a little bit tougher. It could be so cool. Funky's purpose in Donkey Kong, even in Donkey Kong 64 in a way, was always in giving the Kongs access to new areas. He was a supporting character, much like Candy, except less disturbing. So that should be his purpose in DK64 Returns. Except this time he should be playable. Hipster Funky shouldn't have really any special abilities. Just neuter him completely. Make him so that he can't do anything besides jumping. Which really makes getting to those pads all the more important and all the more challenging, which makes the other Kongs that much more useful. The only exception will be the first level, where Funky rescues the first lost Kong. Not captured, but lost. We'll explain that next time as we start to elaborate on the game's plot, and then walk through each of its levels. Till then, I've been Ninja Hex. This has been Mind of Ninja. until the next one.
Stay like